Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Triangulation is brought to you by Cashfly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Triangulation, episode 236, recorded Monday, February 1st, 2016, The Industries of the Future. Triangulation is brought to you by Igloo Software. Igloo is an intranet you'll actually like. It connects people with the information they need to do their best work. Try it for free at igloosoftware.com/twit or sign up for a live demo and see it in action. And by PillPack, a full-service pharmacy that combines convenient packaging, modern technology, and personalized service to make your life easier. Visit pillpack.com/twit to save $20 on vitamins and OTCs when you transfer over your prescriptions. And by Texture, the mobile app that lets you access the world's most popular magazines anytime, anywhere using your phone or tablet. For your free trial, visit texture.com/triangulation. It's time for Triangulation, the show where we get together with some of the most interesting people in technology, pick their brains and learn something. And we got a good one today. Alec Ross is a former advisor to the Secretary of State. He was during the presidential campaign in 2008, involved with Barack Obama's technology and innovation plan. Hillary Clinton described his work saying, "Alec Ross has been my right hand in all that we're doing for internet freedom, a fighter for freedom, a vocal critic of efforts to control the internet." And he has a new book about innovation called The Industries of the Future. It's not going to look like this. This is an uncorrected proof. Alec Ross joins us on Triangulation. Hello, Alec. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is really timely, of course, because we're about to enter another election cycle. And let me, just before we get into the book, ask you, how important is the presidential election? I mean, you've been front row now. Can it change everything, or is it part of a much larger process?
Oh, it absolutely can change everything. I mean, look, who we choose as president has enormous consequences, in terms of our national security, in terms of our well-being at home. We have survived everything, since we became a country, some 250 years ago. But we don't want to just survive. The United States is in a really privileged position right now. And I think that some of the people running right now, I think that if they were elected, we would definitely soon thereafter be a country in decline, which a lot of people around the world already think we are.
Who doesn't want to make America great again? And in fact, every candidate says they will.
I think America still is great. I think it's downright unpatriotic to say, let's make America great again. It sounds to me like somebody who doesn't have enough stamps in their passports. I've traveled. The last couple of years, my assistant did me a great disservice. She actually totaled up my travel, and it's the equivalent of 25 circumferences of the globe. I've traveled by airplane the equivalent of 2 round trips to the moon with a side trip to New Zealand.
Wow.
Seen this world of ours, and trust me, America is still great.
That's one of the reasons I love travel, because it does tell you that when you get home, you go, wow. And it's some of it is the successful rule of law. We've really figured out how to kind of, as unjust sometimes as the justice system is, it really does work most of the time, and we respect the laws. And you go to so many countries and you see how corruption really degrades a country and brings it down. But we are facing a special challenge right now. Everybody, the world is facing a special challenge. There's globalization. It's no longer just all about us. Technology is destroying some long traditional businesses, building new ones. The pace of change is accelerating, and that's what this book is about, is how we move into the future. What do you see as the challenges facing us?
I think there are a number of challenges. I mean, the first is the changing nature of work itself. This is both an opportunity and it's a threat. I believe it's not the strongest who survives or the most intelligent, but those most adaptable to change. And the workforce as it exists today is going to look very, very different when my kids enter it. I have kids I have a 13-year-old boy, 11-year-old daughter, 8-year-old boy, and their workforce is going to be different than the one I entered when I left college. And, I think that's challenge number one. And when I say the workforce is going to be different, I mean, first, that it is, as you said, going to be more global. I live in Baltimore, and increasingly people in Baltimore are competing against Bangalore, and not just in terms of labor costs. In the last stage of globalization, work went abroad because it was cheaper. Now, many years into sort of global digitization, work is going abroad because that's actually where the skills are. The second changing nature of the changing workforce that I would highlight is as more of our jobs become gigified, as we go from an increasingly from an employer-based system of employment to project-based employment. This is a good thing, I think, by and large, but by the same token, as workers enter into middle age and need things like family leave, workers' compensation, other things that were historically employer-based, it makes things a little tricky. And then the second biggest category of threats that I would flag are robotics and AI. I think that the rise of the robots and increasingly powerful AI is a net positive. But for people who are mediocre or relatively low skilled, then the future is going to be a difficult time.
This book is really wide. It's great because it's wide ranging. You start with robotics. You talk about genomics. You talk about Bitcoin. You talk about we're going from the Cold War to the code war. You talk about big data. So it's almost a series of essays about these specific challenges and how we can make our way. But in general, my sense is that you're a technologist and you feel positive about the impact of technology on the future.
Oh, I do. Look, I think that while there are some somewhat dark places in the book, I think that tomorrow is going to be better than today. And I think it's in significant measure because of technology. We are going to live longer lives because of the commercialization of genomics. We are going to have more and better information. We're going to have tools to do things much more quickly and effectively. I mean, think about when you bought a house last. My wife and I did this a year and a half ago, and the closing costs buying a new house were over $10,000. It took a couple months. It took accountants and lawyers. With blockchain technology coming into legal processes, what today costs $10,000 and takes 2 months, I think tomorrow could take 2 hours and cost $10. So I think that there's an enormous amount of good that's going to come driven by scientific and technological advancement. I'm not a cyber utopian, but I'm sort of net positive on what it's going to do for the world.
Let me go through some of the issues that we are facing and maybe how you could talk about how technology might impact it, help it, perhaps. One of the biggest, of course, is income inequality. And it's been interesting to watch Silicon Valley address this, starting with Paul Graham, saying, well, the kind of value that Silicon Valley creates is very different than the kind of value Wall Street creates. We're really adding to the economy. But yet, I have to say, the march of technology looks to a lot of people, as they lose their jobs and find a difficult time finding new ones, like something that's promoting income inequality, not solving it.
Well, look, I mean, technology does two things. It creates more bounty and more spread. So what does that mean? More bounty means more economic well-being, broadly stated, but it also means things like healthier food. It means access to more and better information. It means less time wasted. So it's not just economics. It creates more bounty, but it also does create more spread. What does that mean? That means that the economic benefits, the shareholders, the people who end up making money, it tends to be concentrated in far fewer hands.
That's not a problem.
I mean, oh, it is a problem.
Okay.
So I'm actually not agreeing with anybody who says that new technologies don't exacerbate income inequality. They do exacerbate income inequality, which is why you need to think about, what are those things we can do to make sure that people aren't left behind,
Right.
like a guaranteed basic income, or strengthening and raising the safety net. I'm not in favor of a basic income. Others in Silicon Valley increasingly are. But I tend to come down on this where Mark Andreessen does, which is to say, all right, in a world of more bounty and more spread, let's make sure that we have a really strong and high safety net.
Yeah, I think it was Mark who said that, well, everything's going to get almost infinitely cheap. And so this will handle income inequality because you won't need much income to live like a king. That seems like a utopian future. I wouldn't hate it, but it also seems like difficult to reach.
Look, I think about when I was growing up in West Virginia, it was only rich people who had color TVs in the 1970s.
Yeah.
And today, you can go into the hood, into the poorest community in Baltimore, where I used to teach, and walk into a shack, and there's a color TV in there.
More than that, I remember going to rural China, and one of the status symbols was an HD TV, a fairly large HD TV, in essentially what would have been a peasant household 20 years ago.
So this is exactly the point. So maybe these people on a relative basis actually don't have much money, but they have more bounty. They have more well-being. If somebody is poor today and has a big screen color TV, and in 1975, somebody was rich and had a small color TV,
what does it mean to be rich and poor? I understand.
What does it mean to be rich and poor?
Yeah.
It's all on a relative basis. And that's not to say that being poor is something that we ought to sort of wave our hands at.
Absolutely not.
But what it is to say is like, look, if people are eating better and healthier, if they are getting more and better entertainment, we do have to measure these things, sort of this non-economic well-being as well, which is what Mark Andreessen oftentimes pushes.
Yeah. There's also, though, the issue of dignity and of feeling good about yourself. And one of the keys for human dignity is having work, a meaningful work. And if you're unemployed, even if you have a color TV, you may not really be achieving your life goal. We got to find a way to put people to work. And it seems like we're not doing a very good job with that, or are we?
Well, so we're doing a lot better job of it in the United States.
Lots of jobs created, I understand.
Yeah, we're doing a lot better job of it in the United States than just about everybody else in the world. I mean, one of the biggest problems in the Middle East, fueling all of the disasters there, is youth unemployment or youth underemployment. If you want to know why there's so much rage in the Middle East, one big reason for it is, 17 to 30-year-olds who have no dignity and who are unemployed or underemployed. Similarly, in Europe right now, part of what's taking the right and making it go very far right, and the political left and taking it very far left, are the staggeringly high levels of youth unemployment. We don't really have that in the United States anywhere close to what they have in the Middle East and Europe. And what's more, in the United States, if you do have a certain set of skills, there is a job open for you. In my home state of Maryland, we have literally tens of thousands of openings in the field of cybersecurity that are just wide open, waiting for somebody with the skills to come in and take them. And so those who are unemployed don't have the necessary skills. So it's increasingly Darwinian out there.
Yeah.
But if you can get these skills, then there is a job for you.
Isn't that interesting? So it comes down to education, offering, this country is famous for its free public education. Our system, though, seems to be crumbling. You look to Scandinavia, for instance, where they have free higher education. Many countries in Europe have free higher education. And does that seem like one of the ways that we can dig our way out of this issue and redirect?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't start giving away free university educations. What I would do is here are two things I would focus on. Neither of them are sexy, but both of them are really important. Vocational education and community college.
Yep.
Like vocational ed, look, the cool kids in Silicon Valley, none of them were in vocational education. When we go out to dinner parties, Leo, it's more likely than not, we're not sitting beside people who went to community college. But you want to know something? Millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of people rely on vocational education and community colleges. And they are largely unchanged over the last 50 years. So if you want to reinvent something, reinvent vocational education, reinvent community colleges. You know, these are the most vulnerable segments of society, people who rely on these systems, and they're also ones which have almost formulaic syllabuses. And so if you can really reorient those education systems to the industries of the future, the people going through them are going to be a lot better off.
I couldn't agree with you more. We were talking to a security expert who said there will be 1 million, many of them unfilled security jobs, computer security jobs in the next year. This is a great opportunity, and it is the kind of thing you can learn at a community college easily. There will be in high-end machining and tooling and some very, significant job opportunities in the United States there. There's not going to be a job opportunity on the assembly line much longer, but there are job opportunities.
You're 100% correct. You got it. The jobs are available right now, right this very minute.
Well, I hope people watching know that. I think our audience does. I mean, our audience is an audience of geeks, and I think very many of them work in IT. They understand the value of that certificate, and they do that. Yeah.
I sit on all these boards, and one of the big things on all the boards that I sit on is, how do we hire more people? How do we hire the best people? How can we find new sources of employees? And so to then juxtapose that with, income stagnation for working class and middle income America, you can see the mismatch between what's out there and where a lot of Americans are. Yeah. And this is what I try to write about in the industries of the future. The whole reason I wrote that book was to try to bring broader access to what the next 10 years are going to look like to more people.
As Eric Schmidt says on the back, in a world growing more chaotic, Alec Ross is one of those very rare people who can see patterns in the chaos and guidance for the road forward. And that's what we're talking about here, the industries of the future. Alec Ross, it goes on sale tomorrow. Very timely interview from Harper Collins. No, Simon & Schuster. Oops. And you'll find it. Not that that matters anymore. You just go to Amazon and you search for Alec Ross.
That's right. That's right.
Nowadays, who cares who the publisher is? I'll give you the ISBN number if you really want. We're going to take a break. We'll come up with more in just a second with our guest Alec Ross. This is great stuff. But first, a word for the person in charge of the corporate intranet. There's a better way out there. I love Igloo. Igloo is an intranet you'll like, and your employees will use. An intranet is important in your company. That's as your company grows, the best way to stay in touch, to help your employees collaborate, to share files, to coordinate calendars. And Igloo does all of that. And one of the things I love best about Igloo is you pay once and you get it all. There's none of this piecemeal, oh, you want that? Oh, you want that? It all is there. Complete control, too, with a big variety of authentication, identity services, of course, SSL, private clouds, full encryption, public key, crypto. And it works with all of the solutions you're already using, Salesforce and SharePoint and Active Directory. Coming soon, they're going to start using Box and Dropbox as well. I know a lot of businesses are using those. Great for getting started, a growing company. Great for a large enterprise that wants to make their communications strategy fit the expectations of your employees. They're used to social networks. They like the idea of something attractive. They like buttons. They like sharing. Government agencies are using Igloo software. Companies like Hulu, Inventive Health, American Family Insurance, Ipswich. It is a great solution. I want you to try it. Free. igloosoftware.com/twit. You can also go there and sign up for a live demo if you want to see it in action. But, here's the best thing. You can, if you go to that link, igloosoftware.com/twit, you can sign up for up to 10 people for free forever. So a small company that's just getting started, or you just want to try it with a single, part of your enterprise, free for 10 people forever. igloosoftware.com/twit. Of course, it scales to tens of thousands, and it's completely responsive, so you don't have to use it on the desktop. It works on your mobile, any web browser, any size screen. Drag and drop, WYSIWYG editor. I mean, of course, it's modern. It's all of the stuff you want. igloosoftware.com/twit. An intranet, I like the slogan, you'll actually like, which kind of says something about the other guys. Our guest is Alec Ross. He's the author of a book, The Industries of the Future. I wouldn't mind going through this chapter by chapter. The first chapter, of course, here come the robots. And that is both good and bad. Autonomous cars, that's a robot. The cars that you buy today are built mostly by robots. Sometimes people say, well, robots, I don't know, do we trust them? They're taking jobs. Is it really a good thing? What is the opportunity that robots offer us?
Yeah, so I think the robots from the 1970s, from the cartoons and movies of the 1970s, are going to be the reality of the 2020s.
You mean the Jetsons Rosie? I'm going to have a Rosie?
You're going to have a Rosie if you want one. If you need a Rosie.
I want a Rosie.
Look, I think that robots are going to do a couple things that are positive and a couple things that are potentially negative. On the positive side, they can do the work that is dull, repetitive, and dangerous.
Right.
So a lot of the labor that tends to be taken up by robotics tends to be doing the kind of manual and routine labor that don't necessarily make for a very fulfilling life for humans. The challenge posed by that, obviously, is that labor displacement. And
Right.
what's more is robotics combined with artificial intelligence means that the work that historically is done by robots, which has been manual and routine, now can be cognitive and non-routine. So what that means, I love my father, but as a practical matter, he spent 45 years of his life doing real estate closings as a country lawyer in West Virginia. I think in 10 years, the work he spent 45 years doing and put me through college doing will be replaced
Wow.
by AI combined
Wow.
with blockchain technology.
Wow.
And so what's going to happen is we're going to go from robotics replacing blue-collar workers with strong shoulders to replacing what I would call sort of low-level white-collar workers.
You talk about a little bit about the singularity. And we've talked with Ray Kurzweil and many others about the singularity. The idea that sometime in the future, artificial intelligence will be indistinguishable for humans. That's the real definition. They won't have human minds necessarily, but we won't be able to tell the difference. You say robotics is about the same place the internet was 20 years ago. Look at the leap the internet's taken in 20 years. Are we 20 years away from a singularity? What's your position on that?
And we could be. I mean, it's hard to project a specific date. I'm not a mathematician, but it would not surprise me if in 20 years from now we were getting very close to that. And I give Reid Hoffman, who's a friend of mine who started
Love him.
LinkedIn, and
Yep.
a handful of others have started an initiative which I think is very smart, which is focused on AI for good.
Yes.
If artificial intelligence is going to develop as quickly as some of us think it might, then let's establish a set of norms. Let's establish some rules for the road to make sure that artificial intelligence is used for good, that we can benefit from it, but that it can also be contained in the right way. I don't know if contain is the right word, but let's focus on AI for good. And I think it's to their great credit that they are beginning now, while it's still sort of chapter 1, page 1.
Yeah, Reid, Elon Musk, Peter Thiel put $1 billion into a nonprofit called OpenAI. And also, these guys have also warned about a Terminator future. There is also some concern about what an AI, a real AI, could mean to us as human beings. And I think that's also an appropriate area of research. I'm sure they're considering that as well.
Yeah, Hillary Clinton took a trip to the West Coast one time, and, those of us who advised her were expecting her to come back and talk about all the wonderful things that were being innovated there. And she came back noting those things, but also scared to death about AI.
Yeah.
And hearing about it from people in Silicon Valley. It's people in Silicon Valley who freaked her out and said, hey, government needs to get involved in this. And so that was not necessarily what I expected.
What's your position on that? You said government shouldn't get involved in the internet. Should government stay out of robotics and AI?
For now, I do. I think so, yeah. I mean, I think the government, we don't want government to be a solution in search of a problem.
Yeah.
And what I would rather is what Reid and Peter Thiel and Elon Musk and these guys are doing. Let's let them, put $1 billion into this. And with their understanding of this content, which is far greater than anything government's going to have, let's let them study this. I mean, it would be great if certain very sophisticated parts of the government, like DARPA, which is very strong on robotics, like give them a seat at the table as a single stakeholder. But let's try to do this in a multi-stakeholder process. So it's not just a bunch of white shirt, red tie bureaucrats from Washington, but it's a combination of industry, academia, civil society, and government, and take a very broad view. And let's make it international. So I would much rather do that than America's incompetent Congress start writing laws about things that they don't understand.
That is a very refreshing point of view. I think it's reasonable to say free enterprise can't solve all things, but a coalition of responsible people in government and the private sector can solve these things. Both need a seat at the table, though. Because untrammeled free enterprise can also cause problems. And
Precedent for this, Leo?
What?
The internet.
Yeah.
Internet governance.
Perfect.
I mean,
Yep.
Nobody had any idea what the stakes were. No idea.
That's why it happened that way.
That's why you got it. That's why we can still get away with doing it for AI. So internet governance is multi-stakeholder. It's civil society. It's heavy academics. It's private industry, it's government, and you could never get away with that today.
Yeah.
So similarly with AI, if you do create this sort of multi-stakeholder governance approach, then you can keep it from government screwing it up.
Yeah, but you got to do it before anybody sits up and takes notice. Let's talk about genomics, because you also have a chapter dedicated to, you say, the human machine. We've made great strides. Nobody thought that the Human Genome Project would come up with a map of the human genome as quickly as it did. And that's another good example of a race between private enterprise and government-funded research. The private enterprise, Greg Ventnor, won, but to the benefit of all of us, as long as we don't let him patent all the genes.
That's right. No, competition is a good thing.
Yep.
The world's last trillion-dollar industry was created out of computer code. The world's next trillion-dollar industry is going to be created out of our genetic code. So what my book, The Industries of the Future, does is it takes you inside cutting-edge genomics labs at Johns Hopkins, inside Stanford, and identifies those things that are going to be commercialized in the years to come, some of which absolutely blew me away. I mean, one person who I met, I tell the story in the book. There's a guy who I met on the racquetball court, and at first I thought he was just an old gym rat. He's sort of in his 60s, sort of scraggly gray beard, wears this big clunky knee brace on top of a 1970s style pair of sweatpants.
You're describing me. Stop it.
No. Brings his racquetball gear to the court in a Samsonite suitcase.
Okay, not me.
I thought he was just a gym rat. Turns out this guy, Bert Vogelstein, is the world's most cited living scientist.
Wow.
Yeah, how about that?
Wow.
30-some years ago, it was his team at Johns Hopkins that discovered how mutations in proteins cause cancer. Kind of a big deal, right? And so he's now the world's most cited living scientist. And what his team has made breakthroughs on recently are all a product of genomics. They can now take a blood sample, the likes of which we give at our annual checkups right now for, to measure things like cholesterol level. And they are able to detect cancerous cells at 1/100th the size of what can be detected by an MRI. The implications of this, it's a life expectancy changer. This means that cancers that we routinely find in stages 3 and 4, we will now find not just in stage 1, but very early in stage 1. And the only reason why we are not all getting the liquid biopsy at our annual checkup right now is just cost. It's a couple $1,000s, which we know is going to be more than our insurance companies are willing to pay. But the thing is, as the cost of mapping the genome goes down and down and down, it will become increasingly affordable. So you referenced the mapping of the first human genome. That cost $2.7 billion. Toward the end of his life, when Steve Jobs had it done in 2011, just 5 years ago, it cost $100,000. Today, it costs a couple $1,000, getting close to $1,000. Yeah. So you can see there's this plummeting in the cost, largely as a function of big data. And so as this mainstreams and as it commercializes, I believe it's going to add a couple years of average life expectancy for every American.
And that's just around the corner?
This is within 5 years.
Yeah.
This is within 5 years.
We talked a couple of weeks ago on the new Screensavers to a researcher at Stanford who's working with CRISPR, which is another fascinating
area.
No,
when you combine these technologies, the gene splicing work in CRISPR with the diagnostics work from a liquid biopsy, we are talking about adding 3 or 4 years of average life expectancy to every American.
And I don't think it was lip service when President Obama in his State of the Union address. I hope he continues to pursue this notion of, just as we in the 60s said, we're going to, by the end of this decade, put a man on the moon. I think he set the stage for a similar effort to cure cancer. And he said, Joe Biden, whose son, of course, just recently died of cancer, I want you to lead that charge. And I think Joe Biden will. And I do think that that is doable. But we have to put all of our resources behind that kind of thing. And I think this research is a very good starting point.
Well, and if you want to read, and this, both the intellectual content behind this, but also some great stories behind it, that's what's in the industries of the future. This whole idea of being able to melt away cancer has gone from being a pipe dream to being something that's now really in our gun sights.
Wow.
And at the outer limits, most people think 20 years before, not all cancers, but most cancers, we are able to eliminate in their earlier stages and make them non-fatal.
We're talking to Alec Ross, and yes, his new book comes out tomorrow, The Industries of the Future. You can buy it everywhere. Is there going to be an audiobook version of this? I hope there is.
There is.
That's how I listen, Audible.
It took me 3 days. It was, I did it myself.
It was a pain, wasn't it? 3 days is record time, Alec.
I worked very hard on it. It was hard, but I'm glad I did it because I'm glad it's in my own voice.
Yeah. I think, not every author should read their own book, but if you can, and if you're good at it, it really does add some, depth to it, because you know that the person who's reading it is the person who wrote it, who understands what he's saying instead of just reading some words. Really great book. Lots of interesting stuff. You've mentioned blockchain a few times. Let's talk about the blockchain and Bitcoin in just a bit. We're going to take a little break. We were talking about medicine, and here, I want to look what robots have wrought. A new kind of pharmacy. This is PillPack. What an inspiring idea. It's an online pharmacy with real live pharmacists you can talk to 24/7. Yeah, you can call them in the middle of the night. You could transfer your prescriptions over there, and it's very easy. And then, instead of getting hard to open bottles of pills and you have to assemble them into some sort of pill minder, look what you get. On the back, your name, everything you need to know, including an image of every medication you're taking. This, by the way, includes vitamins and over-the-counter medications as well as prescription drugs. A description of it and dosing directions from your physician. I love this idea. They use robots to pack these. They're using very sophisticated image recognition and robots. So you know what time you're supposed to take it, what day and date, what's in it. You just tear it off. It's kind of like this roll, and you tear it off, you take your medication. There's never any question whether you took the last dose because it's gone. You've done it. Now, by the way, even though they're using sophisticated digital imaging technology and robots to put the pill pack together, a pharmacist checks each and every package before it goes to you. Now, they mail it to you. They work. I love this. They work with your physician, so you never have to worry about refills. They just come automatically. And here's the best part. It costs you nothing. No extra cost beyond your standard copays, and the shipping is free. Compatible with almost every insurance plan, including most forms of Medicare Part D. When you sign up for PillPack at pillpack.com/twit, they will, of course, make sure your insurance is compatible before they do anything. But it is very easy to switch over. It's a secure site, and they'll help you do it. Time Magazine named it one of the top 25 inventions of 2015. Jill Duffy, our friend Jill, gave it PC Magazine's Editor's Choice. I agree. There's even a PillPack medication reminder app for the iPhone and the Apple Watch. It's not just for you. If you've got elders in your family who have a hard time keeping track, this is something you can arrange for them that they will really, really appreciate. Pillpack.com/twit. Sign up now. Beautiful site. 5 minutes to sign up. And by the way, as a little incentive, when you use our link and you transfer your prescriptions over to PillPack, you'll get a credit for $20 worth of vitamins and over-the-counter medications. That's PillPack, Bitcoin.com/twit. A better kind of pharmacy, thanks to robots. That's one of the subjects in this new book, the Industries of the Future. Innovation expert and author Alec Ross is with us today. We're talking about it. Now, you've mentioned blockchain a couple of times, and of course, you have a whole chapter on blockchain and Bitcoin. A lot of people in government seem to be are a little nervous about Bitcoin, and maybe rightly so after the failure of Mt. Gox and the Silk Road. Bitcoin maybe is looking a little sketchier than it did before, but blockchain's more than Bitcoin's just a part of what blockchain could mean. Tell us why you use the term blockchain and why you give it such importance.
Well, I think that digitization has changed, many fields, from advertising to elections to many, many others, but it has not yet really taken over a number of fields that require 5 nines worth of trust, 99.999% trust in very high value transactions. Like going back to the example of buying a house. We are comfortable buying a plane ticket online. We're comfortable, going to eBay and buying just about anything. But home sales are largely not being done through frictionless marketplaces. Why is that? Because we need all of this trust, which we end up paying an enormous amount for in the form of lawyers. What blockchain technology can do, the very concept of the open ledger system can do is take out friction, take out the kind of trust that historically has been inured by a lawyer, asking us for 62 signatures and a bunch of wax seals. So I
still
can't
cracks
help.
me up when somebody faxes me a document, says sign it and fax it back, and that's considered authentication.
Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? It's 2016,
You
people.
just bought a house, right? Didn't you do
did.
that like none?
Oh.
It's like, what?
Oh.
Is this really
No,
how it works?
It was like being at a religious ceremony.
It is.
First of all, you wait 2 months. Okay, well, the seller wants to sell it to you. The buyer wants to buy it. We have the money. And they say, okay, well, we'll see you in 2 months. Oh, what the?
What?
2 months. And oh, by the way, it's going to cost you like 15 grand.
Yeah.
What? Why?
Yeah.
And then you go there and, there are these, okay, great, Bic pens, we're going to sign these things. That's what we are. For hours. So look, this is like, and there's a ton of money involved. And where there's a ton of money involved, somebody's going to figure out how to make that money.
So blockchain is not about Bitcoin. Blockchain is about authentication, really.
So blockchain for me is a protocol. It's like the blockchain can be for high value transactions what HTML was for the World Wide Web.
Oh, interesting.
And the blockchain is a technology that came out of Bitcoin. Bitcoin has problems with its ecosystem, but one thing it did have was a very elegant innovation, a breakthrough innovation in computer science, which is its underlying technology, its blockchain technology. And what's interesting is to see how this aspect of Bitcoin is now taking root. I mean, I've had a couple conversations with Lloyd Blankfein, who's the CEO of Goldman Sachs, about this. And whatever you think about Goldman Sachs, those guys know how to make money. And I remember the first conversation I had with Blankfein a couple of years ago, he sort of sniffed and sneered and was dismissive about Bitcoin. Then I talked to him last year and he goes, we're looking at the underlying technology. And then right around the holidays, I noticed, because I'm a big old geek, Goldman Sachs filed a patent for their own digital currency leveraging Bitcoin, leveraging blockchain technology. Yep. And it's not that they want to create an alternative currency. It's that Goldman Sachs, think about an institution that moves massive amounts of capital across borders.
Right.
And they, like you and I, when we make international payments, a lot of money falls off the back of the truck.
That's right.
And so for Goldman Sachs to build its own blockchain technology-enabled way of transferring money between, say, India and the U.S., look, these guys are smart. They know what they're doing. And it will be the ultimate irony, by the way, if the cypherpunks who created Bitcoin in part to get away from fiat currencies and Wall Street banks, if this invention of theirs ends up being sort of absorbed and brought to scale by institutions like Goldman Sachs.
You have a view into government. When you say Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, do people make the sign of the cross? What is their response?
They don't understand it.
They just don't get it.
They don't get it at all.
Yeah.
I mean, the problem is that the early press around Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies were around Silk Road
yeah.
and so this is what they know. They're like, oh, isn't that how people
buy drugs?
Buy drugs and traffic women and things like this. And you're kind of like, no, let me explain it to you. And then they start worrying about money laundering and this and that. And what they fail to understand is that there's nothing actually easier to launder than cash. Nothing is more anonymous than cash. And anything that leaves digital footprints is inherently easier to track than cash. And so, look, the early press tarnished it, but I think blockchain technology is perceived as being something sort of separate from Bitcoin, its origins notwithstanding.
Yeah. As long as we're going to talk about that, we should mention crypto and crypto policy, because I think public key crypto, along with blockchain, are really the way forward for authentication, security, et cetera, and yet government law enforcement is very afraid of crypto, and we've already seen state legislators propose laws outlawing in the state of California. Now they want to outlaw encrypted smartphones. Where do you come down on this? And B, how do you talk to policymakers and legislators and lawmakers in a way that they can understand the issues?
So this is a really hard issue. Creating mandatory backdoors for crypto, first of all, is like leaving a key under the doormat.
Right.
Okay.
Bad idea.
It's a bad idea.
Technologists understand that. Governments don't seem to.
Well, this is a case where, let's talk about the U.S. government. So Jim Comey, who's the head of the FBI, has been sort of banging the table, sort of screaming for a mandatory backdoor.
We can't do our job if the
right.
criminals can communicate privately.
But guess who disagrees with them? The head of the NSA, the Secretary of Defense, and the Obama administration.
So it's not a unified front then. You can't say all of government is for.
Yeah, that's right. It's really split. It's split almost right down the middle. And a lot of the time you get these state legislatures that say, oh, well, you can't have crypto, because they're operating off sort of a postage stamp sized understanding of the issue. When in fact, what crypto actually does is it actually makes us more secure.
Right.
And it's so timely for you to have brought this up, because literally today, Harvard University's Berkman Center issued a study on crypto and law enforcement. And what they pointed out was that there's very little evidence that that law enforcement and intelligence agencies have curtailed abilities by virtue of not having mandatory backdoors in the presence of crypto. That there are a variety of other different ways to get access to this content, including, oh, by the way, hacking the device.
I love it that the title of their report is "Don't Panic."
Right? Right? So, but that's exactly right. And look, I spent a lot of time in the White House Situation Room debating this going dark issue, and it was look, not to get political for a second, but I think the FBI was so used to getting whatever it wanted in the Bush administration, like literally whatever they wanted. All they had to do is somebody with a Southern accent says terrorism, and they automatically get whatever they want.
Well, now there's at least in the California lawmaker is saying. What is he saying? White slavery, kind of. He's saying trafficking, and think of the children is always another one.
Well, so when you argue against it puts you in a silly position to argue against it, but you have to, use facts and technology to try to.
Were you able to explain this to people and they get it? I mean, were you able to make headway in this argument? Good.
Yeah. I mean, let's talk about Hillary Clinton, for example. I mean, this was a robust debate with her, and where she ultimately came down on it was saying, all right, well, I will not come out in favor of mandatory backdoors. But what she did say is that there has to be a more robust dialogue between Silicon Valley and the intelligence and law enforcement agencies to figure out ways to get access to information we need access to without breaking their technology.
It's one thing, and it may actually hurt her chances, but one thing that I really like about Clinton is she having spent many years in public service, understands that politics is the art of compromise. It is not about my side has to win. And as much as I might not like that, well, you got to work with the law enforcement and private industry have to work together, it is, in fact, the only way forward in the long run. You just can't have this intransigent two sides point of my side is right and I'm not going to talk to you.
Yeah, you can't govern that way.
You can't govern that way. That's right.
You can't. It's about governance. There's such a difference between politics and governance. And look, if she is ultimately going to be elected president, she's going to have to govern, and she knows that. And I don't think she's capable of, doing as much as she's not capable of being as good a politician as she could be.
Right.
Because she
knows the truth.
She knows the truth. Look, a bill does not become a law because of some purity of argument.
Right.
Whatever your ideology is, you've got to be able to compromise. You've got to be able to collaborate. This is the way the world works.
It's very easy for somebody who's not been in that position to say, to stand up and say, no, well, this is what we're going to do, and I'm going to do it. And the first thing I do when I become president is close Guantanamo. And then you sit down and, it's a little more complicated than that, isn't it? And
this is governance. They say you politic in poetry and you govern in prose.
I love it.
I don't know that what's going on in the presidential election right now is poetry. But, governance it involves commas and it involves semicolons. It's not as simple as all the rest of this.
Yeah. It's an interesting challenge. We're talking with Alec Ross. He's the author of The Industries of the Future. There's so much more to talk about, including big data. I love the code war, not the Cold War. And we certainly are facing cyber warfare, and that is a challenge, the challenge of globalization. It's all in this book, The Industries of the Future. Brand new. It actually will come out tomorrow on Groundhog Day. And so you should look for it even on audible.com. And, of course, Amazon and everywhere you get your books. Let's take a break, and then I wouldn't mind talking a little bit about politics. Just let everybody brace themselves, because it's such a fractious issue. But first, let's talk about magazines. I love magazines. Who doesn't love magazines? The thing I don't love is a pile of magazines on my coffee table, the waste of a subscription that you don't read. And I get the New Yorker every week, but do I read it? No, and it piles up and I feel guilty. And then, it's just, Texture.com. It's a mobile app for your iPad, your iPhone, your Android device that gives you all the magazines you want, not only the current issue on the newsstand, but all the back issues. You read them just as if you're reading the magazine. Everything's in there, but there's also bonus material, video, and stuff that they can't put in a print magazine. There's no clutter. There's no waste. Think of it as like Netflix for magazines. You pay a flat subscription rate, and now you can learn new workouts from Men's Health. You can change your wardrobe and get styling tips from GQ and Esquire. You can read up on your gossip and People and Entertainment Weekly. You can read Wired. You can read, they're all in there. Forbes, Fortune. And, it's so much more affordable than buying magazines on the newsstand or subscribing to a magazine just because there's one article a month you want to read. You can cherry pick the articles that interest you the most. They even help you do that. They've got an editorial team at Texture that recommends daily stories. They have this thing I love called curated collections, where you pick a topic and then they have a collection all around it. There is great work being done in magazines today. You know that. But it's almost inaccessible. Unless they put it on the web, it's inaccessible unless you buy a magazine or subscribe. This is the best way to do it. Texture.com. Now, here's the deal. You get a free trial, unrestricted access to the world's best magazines right now when you go to texture.com/triangulation. Texture.com/triangulation. So you can see what it would be like. There's always an article in Vanity Fair every month I want to read. There's always an article in Wired, or two I want to read. Popular Science, I love browsing. I just want to leaf through the pages. And you can do all of that. Texture.com/triangulation. Take advantage of this. By the way, an excellent gift I've mentioned before. My grandma used to subscribe every Christmas to National Geographic. We had a pile of National Geographics. Grandma, next time, buy Texture through texture.com/triangulation, and you'll not only save money, there won't be a pile, and you'll get National Geographic and a bunch of other stuff. It is a great gift. Texture.com/triangulation. Our guest is Alec Ross. He is, right now you're a visiting fellow at Johns Hopkins. And are you at Columbia University still as a senior fellow there in the International Public Affairs Department?
I'm spending all my time. I spent a couple years at Columbia, but I'm now spending all my time at Johns Hopkins.
Johns Hopkins,
focusing on interdisciplinary studies. Sort of how does science and engineering smash up with international relations?
And he's a much-needed voice, a technologist, one of us, working to help government understand technology, not over-regulate it, and how to enter the future. And this book is for everybody. The Industries of the Future really is a great survey of all the changes we're about to face. We've covered quite a few of them, and what they can mean in a positive way, as well as what the risks are. But really focusing on the excitement and the positive aspects of this. We are entering into, as I began the interview, I talked about this, of course, tonight, as we record this, the Iowa caucus, the beginning of the quadrennial craziness that we call our presidential election. You worked for Hillary Clinton when she was Secretary of State, advised her on innovation. Now, I'm going to accept the fact that maybe you have somewhat of a bias for your former employer. I don't know. But I would love for you to get a chance to tell me, as somebody who will be voting, can I trust Clinton on this stuff? How well does she understand technology? How good is her grasp? And is she on the side of the angels?
Yeah, so look, a lot of this content is non-native for her. Look, she's not a geek.
For all politicians, they're not geeks.
Yep.
Of course not.
But here, the reason why you can trust her is because she has the right instincts, and she'll put the right people around her.
That's what I want to hear. Yeah, you don't expect her to understand how a blockchain works.
Right.
She's not. She may have an email server in her basement. I doubt she has a Bitcoin miner in her basement. She doesn't have an email server anymore.
Yeah. Look, she's so competent. I mean, the reason why, look, she is not going to be the geek president, but she's so competent, and she'll bring great geeks into government. That's what I think we really need from our community. That's what we need to be looking for. Yeah. Is, will the president bring in people who we can trust on this stuff? And just I worked for her for 4 years. And so I got a real close-up view. And things like the email server in the basement notwithstanding, she has good instincts. And so I think that she's a grown-up. She has great relationships in Silicon Valley, and she knows how to listen. And I think that, understanding what you don't understand and then being a good listener is a virtue. Because I don't know about you, but a lot of these politicians to me seem like they forget that they've only got one mouth, but they've got two ears. Hillary Clinton's somebody who's aware that she's got two ears.
They tend to filibuster, don't they?
They do. They talk too much.
Now, I have to point out that President Obama may have been the closest thing to a geek we've ever had in office. He certainly enjoys technology. He brought some very good people in, including Megan Smith, former Google executive, vice president of Google X. She's our CTO. Do you feel like this last 8 years have been positive for, it feels like we've made a lot of progress, I guess.
No, I think they have been, I think it has been a good last 7-year run so far for Silicon Valley and Washington. Not perfect, but good. And, certainly nobody can point, if there have been any problems, they're sort of misdemeanors, they aren't felonies, right?
Well, that's the best you can hope for. Nobody's perfect.
Yeah, nobody's perfect, but I think it's been a good 7-year run. And if you look at things like SOPA and PIPA, the intellectual property bills that came about a biscuit away from being law, I mean, those were about to be signed into law. And then, the angels prevailed.
Yeah, us.
Yeah, us. No, but this is serious.
We rose up on this one and said.
And look, I had a very close-up view of that. we rose up, but ultimately it was also it was principally a policy versus political decision.
Tell us, though, this is really important. Here you are, you're inside the Beltway, looking out. Were they aware of the amount of upset that was going on in the tech community among our audience? Were they seeing those petitions? Did that impact the results?
Yeah, it did. It did. But the way it was not deterministic, meaning the result did not change because of those. What happened is a really rigorous policy examination process took place because of that, and it created the political space to oppose a lot of very powerful people in government, including Democrats. By the way, this was not a Democrat versus Republican thing.
No. It's not
at all.
Yeah.
It mattered, and it was also a case of Silicon Valley showing that it can sit at the grown-ups table politically.
Right.
Sometimes I think that people think Silicon Valley has more power than it actually does in Washington. I would argue that like the farming industry, the defense industries, many other industries are much better about exercising power.
Corn has a seat at the table, my friends.
Oh yeah, sugar. Look, trust me, these guys, and they know how to do business in Washington, in my opinion, better than Silicon Valley, in part because Silicon Valley is a less unified entity, a less unified community.
I think there's a streak of libertarianism that means we don't want to even deal with government.
Oh, that's a huge part of it. And so it sort of disproportionately falls on the shoulders of the small number of people like, Eric Schmidt, like John Chambers, before he was kicked up to the chairman, before he walked up to the chairman's suite, it was a small number of people who really hit the hustings in Washington and did a disproportionate amount of the work for the Valley. But to your question about Hillary Clinton, the key thing here is she has good relationships and good instincts. She's never going to be as technologically literate as other presidents would be and will be, but relationships and instincts, those are what I trust in her.
That's going to be generational. It won't be this generation. It'll be maybe the next generation where we find.
Well, even Obama's a young man,
right,
relatively speaking, and he came in reading off of an iPad, and I think we saw the beginning of that.
Absolutely,
there. Yeah.
Is there any other candidate you look at who seems to be technically literate and with the right instincts?
I think Martin O'Malley does. I mean, he's a young guy. He was a very techno-savvy city and then state official. It's relatively small potatoes, I think, in the eyes of Iowa and New Hampshire voters and what have you. And I think O'Malley's got other challenges. But look, he is technology literate. What he's done in the state of Maryland around biotech and cyber has been a really big deal. So he gets it. And even on the Republican side, I think that some of their more moderate candidates, I think, are pretty reasonable on these issues.
I think, though, the good news is that we are now officially a constituency, partly because the big Silicon Valley companies are going in with lobbying. Sad to say, money does speak volumes in D.C. But also we've taken part, and I think it's really important for everybody who watches, whatever your political persuasion, that it's important that you take part in the conversation. And unfortunately, a lot of geeks, as I said, we're kind of libertarian, and a lot of us just go, oh, it's hopeless. Government's hopeless. I can't deal with it. I'm not going to vote because these guys are all idiots. And that's the kind of attitude that's really going to get us in a pickle. If you don't care, then we got a problem because others do. I also wanted to ask a little bit about TPP. A lot of people who are worried about the power of intellectual property holders in Hollywood and elsewhere are worried about the Trans-Pacific Alliance and the treaty process that's ongoing in secrecy and what it might do to strengthen the power of copyright holders. What do you think?
I think that, so look, first of all, every treaty is going to be negotiated in secret. I mean, that's how it has to happen. That's how it has to happen. I mean, you can't do this out in the open. There will never be another treaty, on anything of any substance. But you
understand that why that bothers people, and people may not understand that.
Oh, sure. No, the word secret, it conjures up ghouls and goblins. Yeah, no. But look, again, having been in government and understanding how this
That's
stuff works.
That's why I'm asking you, yeah.
You can't do this stuff with a webcam in the corner. Right. You can't. So you got to.
Why not? What is going on? Is it what's the
real horse trading that's involved?
Yeah.
I mean, the Trans-Pacific Partnership is 40 countries with 40% of global GDP.
Wow.
I mean, we are talking about trillions of dollars of commerce. There is give and take, and none of that give and take stands up under the scrutiny of live tweeting. Yeah. We'll just live in our own little islands.
Yeah.
Look, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, I think, is a good thing, because what it does is it takes friction out of markets for 40% of global GDP, and that doesn't even include China. Also, given the rise of China, what this does is it strengthens the economic ties between the United States and the rest of Asia. Asia is more than China. There are all these other countries around there, which if they achieve China-like levels of growth, how fabulous would that be? Like how many of our Silicon Valley-based products and services will we now be able to export to countries like Malaysia? So I'm very in favor of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. There are reasonable concerns around things like copyright and what have you, but it is impossible. It is impossible to stitch together such a far-reaching agreement with that many zeros where everybody's going to be happy with everything. I think that ultimately it's agreements like this that are going to position us to be able to export the products and services that our 20-something and 30-something-year-olds are dreaming up and haven't even brought to market yet.
It's quite a challenge. Look, it's not pretty, but it's macroeconomics. Like, are we going to, we've got to make big moves to productively engage in tomorrow's macroeconomics. The book is Industries of the Future. Alec Ross, its author. It is a great read. It's engaging, lots of stories, and it really covers. We didn't get to big data and globalization, and of course the Cold War, but it's in here, and it really covers it in a way that I think you will enjoy as geeks, but I think also that non-geeks need to read and understand, because this is about the challenges, but also the opportunities facing us in the very near years to come. Alec, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
We do Triangulation every Monday morning, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. That's, 1900 UTC if you want to join us live. We appreciate it. If you can't, though, on-demand audio and video is always available after the fact. twit.tv/TRI on our website. And, of course, it's a podcast. That means you can subscribe to audio or video anywhere you subscribe to your podcast. And, of course, there's Twit apps on every platform, including Apple TV, Roku, iOS, Android, even a great app, thank you, Dmitry Lialin, on Windows Phone. So get the app, subscribe. This is a show you don't want to miss. It's an important show each and every week. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next time on Triangulation. Bye-bye.